Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the pre-release notes for the 5.1 patch that will be introducing the Forgotten Realms set to Puzzle Quest. So, let's get into it. Now really quickly, before I go into the patch notes, I wanted to go ahead and showcase this Adult Gold Dragon token. If you've watched my video on my chase cards for the upcoming set, the Sword of Dungeons & Dragons says that it makes an Adult Gold Dragon token. Somehow I missed that this here is said Adult Gold Dragon, not token, copy. So it's a 4/3 Flying Haste with Lifelink. So if you haven't watched my video yet on chase cards, go ahead and watch that. It's on my channel. And if you have watched it and you're one of the many people who have sent me a message about the Adult Gold Dragon, P.S. I actually appreciate that, so thank you. This is the card. This is the Adult Gold Dragon. So, all right, 5.1 release notes. Let's roll. Now we've got some new mechanics coming to Puzzle Quest. The first of them is Pack Tactics. So in Puzzle Quest, Pack Tactics is going to be a named trigger that will activate special effects if the player controls 2 or more buffed creatures at the beginning of combat. So basically, if you look at any of the Pack Tactics creatures, if you have 2 or more buffed creatures at the beginning of combat, then the Pack Tactics is going to trigger. So Pack Tactics is going to read, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 2 or more buffed creatures, perform the following effects. So if we jump over to the set really quickly, we pull up a card that has Pack Tactics. So let's say the Barbarian class, which is not a creature, but nonetheless, that works out. So if you control 2 or more buffed creatures, then you're going to increase this card's level by 1. If this card's level is 3 or more, your creatures get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. So that's going to happen at the beginning of each combat. It'll potentially gain a level, and then it's going to give your creatures a buff and haste. So just an idea for how Pack Tactics is going to work. The next new mechanic is called Venture. And so Venture is a fairly unique mechanic. So this one is based on the whole venture into a dungeon from the Forgotten Realms D&D set. I'm going to imagine that in Puzzle Quest it's going to play out similarly to how it did in the paper set. So in Puzzle Quest, when players venture into a dungeon, if you don't already control a dungeon in play, then you're going to get a prompt. Similar to the Strixhaven Learn. So if you cast a card with Learn, you get a prompt that enables you to pick one of a few different cards with Learn. With this, I'm imagining you'll get to pick from 3 different dungeons. And then you get to pick one of those, and you're going to get a support that enters the battlefield as one of those dungeons. Those dungeons, as a support, are going to act very much like a saga, except instead of going to the next chapter every single turn, or when you proliferate, it's going to effectively go to the next chapter every time thereafter that you venture into a dungeon until you complete the dungeon, at which point you're going to get the dungeon spoils, which will be able to benefit you later on. To finish actually reading the tooltip that they gave us though, so when you venture into a dungeon, if you don't already control a dungeon support in play, then you're going to get a prompt that's going to enable you to pick which of the dungeons will enter the battlefield under your control. And then when you do, the dungeon's going to enter the board as a support of its first room. The dungeons will have multiple rooms, and you will trigger the effects of that first room. If you already control a dungeon, then you're going to advance to the next room and trigger the effects of the next room. When a dungeon is completed, the player is going to earn, as I mentioned, this dungeon spoils as an evergreen on your Planeswalker that lists all of the completed dungeons you have. And those will be used for abilities and payoffs for having completed dungeons. Now, to give a really quick jump over here to the dungeons, I'm guessing that we're going to get 3 dungeons. There are only 3 dungeons in Paper Magic. We've got Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Lost Mine of the Phandelver. I read Philanderer, but that's obviously not it. But I'm going to think of it from that now on. The Lost Mine of the Philanderer, and finally the Tomb of Annihilation. So you'll see that there are different levels, as you will, right? So if we look at Dungeon of the Mad Mage, that first room is the Yawning Portal. The second level is the Dungeon level. The third level, you get to pick between the Bazaar and the Caverns. The fourth level is this Lost level. The fifth level, once again, you get to pick between Muriel's Graveyard and the Runestone Caverns, and then you move on to the Deep Mines, and finally, the Mad Wizard's Lair. So you'll see that for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total rooms in the dungeon. Whereas something like Lost Mine of the Philanderer is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Similarly, the Tomb of Annihilation is 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So just a quick idea of what the dungeons are going to be. Now, I imagine that in Puzzle Quest, they're going to wind up being somewhat similar to the paper versions. So, like, as an example, I imagine that the Tomb of Annihilation will make it so that in the first room, each player is going to lose life. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more why I think that with Tomb of Annihilation, but it's in part because of the Black Planeswalker in the new set. And then I imagine that you'll get to pick between two different sides, and then it will do different things. And then finally you get a big boom from the last one. So, although I can't say that drawing a single card is a big boom for the Philanderer, but whatever. Anywho, those are the 3 dungeons. I imagine that based on what we've seen from some of the Planeswalkers, these will be the 3 dungeons that we get in Puzzle Quest as well. They haven't announced what they are, but if a card has Venture into a dungeon, this is going to be the little image that denotes the evergreen for Venture. The dungeon itself, which will be a support, will have this little doorway, and then when you've completed the dungeon, you're going to get this little evergreen right here on your Planeswalker to say that you have dungeon spoils, you've completed a dungeon. I think that's pretty cool. I'm really excited to try it out for sure. I hope that the dungeons wind up being decent so that you actually want to go through the dungeons instead of just like small secondary effects like they seem to be in paper. But who knows? I haven't played this set competitively in paper. Maybe they have more of an effect in the paper landscape than I am giving them credit for. The next ability is going to be roll a d20. So if you're unfamiliar with dice rolling, a d20 is just a 20-sided die. And so in Puzzle Quest, what's going to happen is when you roll a d20, first and foremost, the board will shuffle. What the board will shuffle means is that all of the gems are just going to shuffle their place. They're going to be reconfigured. Now, with other board shuffles that we've had in the past, it does not create matches. So rolling the d20 is not going to get you a gem match. It's just going to reorder the gems on the board. So they've designed this not only to provide a random flavor of a die roll, because when you roll, it's all random. So by randomizing the gems, it's kind of like having this huge set of randomness, but then also so that it will ideally help with board mechanics like the foretell mechanic from Kaldheim. So we'll see if that winds up being true. I happen to think that in general, being able to work your way toward a gem and then start matching it to make it lose shields is a lot easier than randomizing the gems on the board. However, I don't know. Maybe it will actually wind up being as intended there. So after shuffling, the player's D20 evergreen is going to be updated with a random number from 1 to 20. To give you an idea, on your card, you're going to have a little die right here that shows a D20. And then I'm imagining that this right here is going to appear on your Planeswalker, sort of like how Devotion does, and it will have a number in this little black triangle that will show you what it is your last roll was. So when you roll, then there's going to be a number between 1 and 20 that appears there, and then cards that roll a die are going to perform different effects based on the number that you get. Generally, 20 is going to be something really awesome. Most of the cards and abilities have a special ability for a 20, kind of like, oh, you got a crit. However, then there's going to be other benefits based on higher numbers. Remember, 20 is high, 1 is low. So the D20 is a player evergreen icon that reads, whenever a card rolls a D20, randomize a value from 1 to 20. And it's saying that it's a player evergreen is why I think that this will appear on your Planeswalker portrait in-game. So that's the roll of D20. I think it's really interesting that it winds up shifting the board around. It's especially interesting on the Planeswalkers. And then for the different cards, it just adds an element of randomness, which I think for a lot of players is going to be very fun, just because it's going to be kind of silly shenanigans. If you're a person who likes silly shenanigans, you might like that roll a d20. The next mechanic is Hired. If you haven't looked through the set, there's a heck of a lot of treasure coming around in this set, namely the gold tokens. So Hired is going to be a new mechanic that is going to give the evergreen icon Hired to cards that treasures give mana to. So if you pop a treasure or a gold token and it gives you the 3 mana, the card that gets the mana is going to gain this Hired little evergreen. And then if there is a card that gets a bonus for having Hired, then you'll get that bonus when that card is cast. So basically, if a card has a bonus for Hired, then if that card gains mana from a treasure, then it will get a bonus effect. I would go through the set, but there are fairly few of them, and I don't want to actually go through all of them and make you go, ah! So we've reached the point where there's going to be spoilers, so if you don't want to see what the new Planeswalkers look like, this would be a great place for you to stop watching, because I'm going to be going over the new Planeswalkers. However, if you want to see the new Planeswalkers, by all means, go ahead, stay in and buckle your seatbelts. We've got a bunch of them to go over. So the first one is the Grand Master of Flowers. So Grand Master of Flowers is a mono-white Planeswalker. At level 60, he's going to have 123 health and a bird for some reason, but whatever. It's kind of cool. I like the bird. It's good flavor. Probably doesn't taste like chicken, but flavor is always good. You notice that under the bird is this little turd right here, and I've got no idea what that is. So it's like a little equal sign with these little arrow pointy things. I'm wondering if that is going to be so that we can press that and then it will show us all of the different evergreens that we can get for our player, be it a roll a d20 or something like Devotion or something like what are we at? Hired, roll a d20, Venture. That's it. Yes, Spoils, Dungeon Spoils. There we go. That was a massive brain fart. Anywho. So I imagine that maybe it will have something to do with that, but I don't know. When we have more clarification, then that will be good to know. But anyhow, 3 abilities are Platinum Scales, Way of the Open Hand, and Platinum Dragon. The mana bonuses are going to be +5/+4/3 to all of the allied colors, and then -2/1 to the enemy colors. If you're unfamiliar with what I mean by allied colors versus enemy colors, allied colors for white are blue and green, and the enemy colors are black and red. So this one's got +5 to white, +4 to blue, +3 to green, which is really sweet for the mana bonuses. I actually really like the mana bonuses on all the Planeswalkers in this set. So the first ability, Platinum Scales, is going to draw a card, and then if that card that you draw is a creature, then that creature is going to gain +4/+4, lifelink, and vigilance. Those will all be permanent modifiers and buffs that are applied to that creature in your hand. Otherwise, the card you draw is going to gain 7 mana, and you draw another card. One of the biggest shortcomings that white has is card draw, so this ability I see is actually going to be pretty good. Because if you get a creature, that creature is going to gain lifelink and a power toughness boost, which is nice because then you don't actually have to throw anything into your deck to gain life so that you can top yourself off. You just are going to have it built into one of your abilities. And then it's going to serve as if you don't get a creature, well, that's going to be fine too, because the card you draw is going to gain 7 mana, which is very respectable. And then you're going to draw another card. So it's either going to draw 1 card and give that card a really nice boost, or you're going to draw 2 cards and give one of those cards a really nice boost. Either way, it's giving you card draw through loyalty, which is really nice. The only downside to the ability is it costs 7 loyalty, which is a bit on the expensive side for a first ability to draw a card. So we'll have to see if that feels prohibitively large or if it actually just winds up being super easy peasy lemon squeezy to use. That said, how this dude is getting platinum scales is beyond me. I don't know. Maybe it's because of his beautiful platinum blonde hair, but I'm going to go ahead and guess it. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Way of the Open Hand. You're going to create a Monk of the Open Hand token. Then increase its level by 1 4 times. Basically, increase its level 4 times. Then you're going to increase your non-spell cards level by 1. So your creatures and your supports that can level up are going to level up. Now that Monk of the Open Hand token is an elf monk. It's a 1/1 white creature. that has when you cast your second card each turn, level this creature up. And remember, every time it levels up, it reinforces. Why? Because when this card's level is increased, reinforce this creature. Then disable target opposing creature without double strike, first strike, or vigilance until the beginning of your next turn. This effect can trigger up to 3 times per turn, which means that when you actually use the ability Way of the Open Hand and you create your monk token and level it up 4 times, you're going to potentially disable all 3 of your opponent's creatures until your next turn. Now, the token itself generally seems kind of weak because it's a 1/1 and it's going to reinforce whenever you level it up. It's coming into play as a 5/5, so not very strong on its own, but nonetheless, it's still not entirely terrible because of the Planeswalker's third ability and the ability to lock things down with disable. Furthermore, as long as this card's level is 7 or more, the token is going to gain double strike, which is definitely nice to have. Now, the third ability is really what's going to make this Planeswalker. The third ability is Platinum Dragon. Target creature's base power and toughness becomes 7/7. Then reinforce it. That creature gains first strike, flying, and vigilance. It gains the dragon and god subtypes. So I bet this thing right here would be like a wet dream for Nicole Bolas. You're just like, oh my gosh, we're going to get a whole bunch of extra dragon gods. Nice and juicy. I mean, we're getting a whole bunch of sweet dragons in the set, but whatever. That aside. So that target creature's base power and toughness becomes 7/7 is going to be massively powerful for tokens because it's going to make it so that your little 1/1 little white human tokens that are produced by a whole bunch of cards are now all 7/7s. So every time they reinforce, they're going to reinforce by 7 instead of by 1. Furthermore, that creature is going to have first strike, flying, and vigilance, which means that when your opponent attacks you, all of your opponent's stuff is probably going to run into it and just immediately die because it's got first strike and vigilance and flying. And the creature will minimally be a 14/14 because even if you just have a 1/1 out and you use Platinum Dragon on it, then that 1/1's going to reinforce. Its base power toughness is going to be 7/7, so it's going to jump to 14/14, get first strike, flying, and vigilance. Now, I know you might be looking at this and saying, wait, but that's basically what Sarah did. Except that here's the thing, Sarah needed to use 2 loyalty abilities, whereas this just needs to use 1 ability. So with Sarah, you had to get the token down, and then the token would just sort of sit passively there on the battlefield, maybe get killed on your opponent's turn, and then attack. Whereas with this, if you've got a token down, you're not creating a new token or anything. You've got your token down, it's able to attack your opponent, then you use the Platinum Dragon ability, and then you kill your opponent. So this seems like a really good ability. I could very well see Grandmaster of Flowers becoming the best mono-white Planeswalker. However, it's something that we'll have to test out. 21 loyalty is quite a lot. 7 loyalty is quite a lot for what that one does. And then this second ability just doesn't seem particularly great without using the third ability, but having access to 33 loyalty is going to be pretty extreme. That said, I still do think that this very well may be the best mono-white Planeswalker in the game. It looks very good between its abilities and its mana bonuses, and I'm very excited to try that one out. Our next Planeswalker is Mordenkainen. Mordenkainen is a mono-blue Planeswalker. Looks a heck of a lot like my older brother. He lost the genetic lottery between the two of us. You see, he's got the blue eyes, which means that, you know, he sort of won the genetic lottery, but then he's got hair like Mordenkainen. Whereas I have a very luscious thing of hair on my head, meaning that the way that I see it is that I won the genetic lottery because there are many more hair cells than there are eyes in your head. So I have many more goodnesses on top of my head. But anyways, my conflict with my older brother notwithstanding, Mordenkainen is a mono-blue creature. Mordenkainen's mana bonuses are the 5/4/3 -2/-1. The 5 is to blue, the 4 is to white, the 3 is to black. And the 3 abilities are Involuntary Wizardry, Faithful Hound, and Penultimate Cogitation. So Involuntary Wizardry is going to draw up to 2 cards. It says up to 2 cards because if you have a 5-card hand, you're only going to draw 1 card, right? So draw up to 2 cards. Then pick one of the first 4 cards in your hand. Then roll a d20. If that roll is a 1 to 10, you exile that card. If that roll is an 11 through a 19, it's going to gain half of its mana. If it rolls a 20, it gains full mana. So This ability is very interesting, and I feel like that's just the best word that I can give for this ability. So the thing that I like about the ability is that you draw cards and then you're going to roll a d20. And by drawing cards and rolling a d20, you activate loyalty abilities before you make your swaps. And so if there aren't any good matches for you on the board, then what you can do is use the involuntary wizardry, which is going to shuffle the board, and then you could go ahead and ideally get a swap that's going to be more beneficial for you. However, that half of the time you use this ability, you're going to exile the card that you pick, whereas the other half of the time it's going to get mana. Really doesn't make me want to pick a card that I want to keep, because there's a coin flip as to whether or not you get to keep the card. So if it's something that you really need for maybe a combo, or maybe you're just in a little bit of a sticky situation and you need to give some mana to your removal, this is not the way you're going to want to do it. So I really see the best use of this ability just to shuffle the board when needed. However, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there winds up being a reason that you would actually want to exile the card. I don't know. What do I know? Faithful Hound. Second ability is going to be 12 loyalty. Create a Faithful Hound creature token. That Faithful Hound is, ding ding, a 1/1 dog. And then it has, when this creature attacks, remove all buffs from the first opposing buffed creature, which is pretty cool. As long as this thing's down, your opponent can't really buff their creatures, because this thing's just going to eat away all the buffs. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2 for each card with a different name in your hand, for a maximum of +12/+12, meaning that this doggo is going to have a maximum power toughness on creation of 13/13, which really isn't that bad. So 12 loyalty for potentially a 13/13 is pretty solid. Just like with the first ability, after creating the doggo, you're then going to roll a d20. 1 to 10, your illusion creatures gain flying. The dog is an illusion creature. 11 to 18, your illusion creatures gain flying and unblockable. And 19 to 20, your illusion creatures gain flying, unblockable, and hexproof. This ability really seems a little bit more gimmicky than great to me. However, you could just spam the ability if you have a bunch of different cards in hand to make a really strong dog. So, I mean, that bit could be kind of cool. The third ability, Penultimate Cogitation, is definitely what makes this Planeswalker. So create a Mordenkainen's Penultimate Cogitation token. Then exile your hand and draw the first 6 different cards from your library. Those cards are all going to gain half of their mana. Now, that Mordenkainen's Penultimate Cogitation token is an emblem with 5 shields, and when you cast a non-copy spell for the first time each turn, roll a d20. 1 to 10, copy that card, it gets half its mana. 11 to 18, copy that card, it gets full mana. 19 to 20, copy that card, then each spell card in your hand gains full mana. This seems like an absolutely phenomenal ability, because you're going to basically, at the very least, double cast all of your spells, because even if you critically miss with a 1, you're going to copy the spell and give that copy half of its mana. Half of the time, your card is going to get full mana, and I say half of the time because an 11 through a 20 is going to get you full mana. However, with that 19 to 20, which is going to be 10% of the time, all the spells in your hand gain full mana. All of them are going to cast, all of them are going to have the opportunity to copy, and half of them are going to get full mana. So I could see some pretty wacky things happening with this. This would be a much cooler ability on a Planeswalker that was more than just blue. However, we do have a lot of multicolored sets in Puzzle Quest right now, and so I could see this Planeswalker being a very fun, gimmicky Planeswalker because of the combination of the third ability and then just being able to reshuffle the board with the first ability. I don't see Mordenkainen being high on my tier list. However, I do see him being a very fun and flavorful Planeswalker for the set. The next Planeswalker is Lolth, Spider Queen. So Lolth is a mono black Planeswalker, has 118 health. She's got her 5/4/3 bonuses to black, red, and blue. And her abilities are going to be based on losing life and spiders. So for the first ability, Knowledge of the Underdark, you're going to create a Demon Web Pits token. That token is the pits when you first make it. It has 3 shields, and when a creature you control dies, gain 2 loyalty. If that card is a non-token creature, create a black spider token. That spider token is a 2/1 with menace and reach. then you may lose 6 life. Oh, sorry, no, draw 2 cards. Then you may lose 6 life. If you do, the last 2 cards in your hand gain 6 mana. So either the 2 cards that you've just drawn gain 6 mana, or you drew 1 card and you have strategically placed something into your 5th slot in your hand so that it gains the mana. I happen to think that a lot of the time you will probably want to lose the life to give the cards mana. Not all the time, but a lot of the time for sure. At the very least, 6 loyalty to draw 2 cards and then choose to lose 6 life to then give the last 2 cards in your hand mana is a very good ability. So I do very much like the Knowledge of the Underdark ability. The second ability is Lolth's Punishment. So you're going to destroy target opposing creature, then create a copy of Drider on the battlefield under your control. That card gains the Darkness emblem, and each player loses 6 life. If you're unfamiliar with what Drider does, Drider is this uncommon elf spider right over here. It's going to be a 4/3 with Menace, and when this creature deals combat damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, create a black spider token. Then, if this card has the Darkness emblem, and the only way to get that Darkness emblem is with the second ability of Lolth, then when you lose life during your turn, your opponent loses that much life. Now, Drider really seems to play in pretty well with Lolth because of how she's going to potentially lose life from some of her abilities. Like, for example, this create a Demon Web Pits token to draw 2 cards, and then you lose 6 life to give your cards mana, but then your opponent loses the life also. Furthermore, when you actually make Drider, you're going to make it so that it gets the emblem and then each player loses 6 life. And when you make each player lose 6 life, your opponent is actually going to lose 12 because they'll lose 6 for your using the ability, and they're going to lose 6 from Drider pinging them for another 6 for you having lost life on your turn. All that to say that for 12 loyalty, you're getting quite a lot of value out of Lolth's Punishment, and I think that it's a very good ability. The third ability is called Demon Web Pits, which you know is the name of the token that you get for the first ability. So you're going to create a Demon Web Pits token, and that's just in the event that you don't already have one. If you do, you're just going to reinforce a thing. Then that support gains the Darkness emblem. Your creatures gain Berserker, Death Touch, and Double Strike until end of turn. Now, the Darkness emblem on our Demon Web Pits is going to make it so that when a non-token creature dies, create X black spider tokens, where X is equal to that creature's toughness. So there's a lot to unpack here. Basically, if you kill a creature, then you're going to get spider tokens on the battlefield that are going to have double the power of the creature's toughness, right? So if the toughness was 10, you're going to get 20 power worth of spiders. And that's just because the spiders are 2/1s. The whole kit here is really going to be all around sort of just destroying things, getting spider tokens, and then swarming your opponent with spiders. The spiders have reach, so they're going to be blocking things and either dying or killing them, which is going to help the Demon Web Pit token give you more loyalty. And then when you've used the third ability and you've gotten the Darkness emblem, then you're going to ideally just smash your opponent and kill them that turn. The Berserker, Death Touch, and Double Strike will make it so that at the very least, you're going to whap into your opponent's creatures, ideally kill them, and then make a bunch of spiders, which will ideally already be on the battlefield, so have Double Strike, and then swing even harder than they would have before. Overall, I think that the design of Lolth Spider Queen is very cool. I really like her for flavor purposes. I think that she'll actually be a very decent Planeswalker, but I don't think she's going to be a top tier walker. That said, I could be surprised. It could be that her kit is just absolutely amazing. It remains to be seen. I am very excited to try her out also. Our next Planeswalker is Zariel, Archduke of Avernus. So Zariel is the mono red Planeswalker. There is a mono-colored Planeswalker for every color. She, at level 60, is going to have 119 health. Her plus 5/4/3 are going to be to red, black, and green. Her first ability is called Fallen Solar. So you're going to roll a d20. If it's a 1 to 10, your creatures get +6/+0 and haste until end of turn. If it's an 11 to 19, you're going to destroy 6 non-red gems. And if it's a 20, you're going to crit and perform each of the effects and get all of your loyalty back. So get the 6 loyalty back that you used for the ability. So destroying 6 non-red gems isn't a whole lot of gem destruction, so it's probably not going to make all too many matches. However, it will occasionally make matches for you. Your creature's getting +6/+0, and haste is sort of okay. It's really, I think, more an ability that you would use for the roll a d20 and then just swapping the board around. So basically, just if you don't already have a good swap available, then you can use the ability, and you can ideally get a better swap for yourself. The second ability, Legions of Avernus, is you're going to roll a d20 and create a red devil token. That red devil token is that little 1/1 red creature that when it dies, the opponent's first creature takes damage equal to the devil's power. And then you're going to reinforce it X times, where X is 4 plus the roll result. So that means that if you roll a 20, you're going to reinforce it 24 times, meaning that you're going to get 25 devils, which means you're going to have a 25/25 for this ability for just 12 loyalty. But there's more to it. If the roll result is 16 or more, your creatures get +X/+0 and gain Berserker and haste. That +X/+0 is a permanent +X buff. So 16 or more is going to happen 25% of the time. So 1/4 of the time that you use this ability, you're going to get a super massive boost, because let's pretend that you get the lowest possible of those. Let's say you get a 16, right? You're going to create the red devil token. So that's 1 token. Then you're going to reinforce it 16 plus 4 times, right? So that's going to be 20 times. So you're going to have a 21/21. And then your creatures are going to get +16/+0 Berserker and haste. So that 21 power token is now going to have 37 power, Berserker, and haste. So for 12 loyalty, as long as you get 1/4 of the time the 16 or higher, you're getting a 31 haste power creature, which is very solid. I really like this ability. It has a lot of flavor for the roll d20. There's definitely a reason to use it. There's going to be a massive upside to the ability that could make really powerful red devil tokens. And then on top of that, not only do you have the power to make these really strong tokens, but 1/4 of the time, those tokens are then going to make it so that all your creatures are going to get an absolutely massive buff and then swing in to kill your opponent. So really, really like that Legions of Avernus ability. The third ability, Blood War, is going to create a Blood War token. Then that support is going to gain the War emblem. Roll a d20, deal X damage to any opposing target. X is 5 plus the roll result. So that's a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 25, which is a nice little bonus to be able to do to just about anything. The average roll is going to be 10. And so if you get that average roll of 10, that's still 15 damage to anything, which is pretty solid. Now that Blood War token is going to be an emblem with 4 shields, and when your first creature attacks, reinforce that creature, and it gains double strike until end of turn. Now from the way that reads, I'm going to guess that reinforce that creature stays permanently, and then double strike is what is gained until end of turn. Nonetheless, that is incredibly powerful and very good. Every time your first creature attacks, reinforce it, and then give it double strike. Way more damage. And then if the support has the War emblem, which it will, because starting at, my guess, is rank 2, it will get that War emblem. Then when a creature dies, deal X damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, where X is equal to that creature's power. So as your creature gets that double strike, let's say that you then wind up using your second ability to give your creatures Berserker, and then that double strike Berserker swings at your opponent, destroys their creatures, and then your opponent is going to take damage equal to that creature's power. So all in all, this Planeswalker looks very good. She has some very cool abilities. I think she's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know if she's going to be a top tier Planeswalker, but I do think that she'll actually be pretty strong. And what would be really nice about her is that she looks like she'll be really strong regardless of what you have in your collection, because the Legions of Avernus just creates those devil tokens and makes them strong no matter what. And Blood of War is going to work really well with that Legions of Avernus token. So really cool Planeswalker all in all. Very much like that one. Our next one is Eliwick Tumblestrum. So Eliwick Tumblestrum is a green bard Planeswalker. This one has 125 health at level 60. Her 5/4/3 bonuses are going to be to green, red, white, to green +5, red +4, white +3. Her 3 abilities are going to be Dungeon Tales, Legendary Allies, and Adventurous Song. For DuckTales, you're going to venture into a dungeon, then draw a card. If you have dungeon spoils, so remember that means that you have completed a dungeon, then you're going to create 3 gold tokens. Now what this does is this just enables you to have a loyalty ability that's going to spam through the different rooms of a dungeon to make it so that you can go ahead and complete a dungeon. Furthermore, it's going to draw you a card, and then if you already have the dungeon spoils, it's still going to make it so that you're going to venture through those dungeons more quickly, but it's also going to start making gold tokens to give you mana, which is pretty neat if you wind up liking the venture into the dungeon mechanic. The second ability is called Legendary Allies. For 9 loyalty, you're going to pick one of the first 4 different cards from your library. Fetch that card. It gains half of its mana. If that card is legendary, you gain 9 life and gain 6 loyalty. So this ability is actually a really cool ability because it costs 9 loyalty, but if you just stack your deck with legendary cards, it is kind of like once you have the 9 loyalty, it's only going to cost 3 loyalty to be able to fetch legendary cards, give them half their mana, and gain life. So that right there is a phenomenal ability. It's something that you're going to be able to spam like crazy, and you're just going to get so much value out of it between the half mana, the life, and then the gained loyalty. I see this being a very good ability. The third ability, Adventurous Song, is going to create an Adventurous Song token. Then your creatures get +X permanently and gain haste and trample. X is 5 + 2 per dungeon you've completed. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I have a very solid reason to believe that there will be 3 dungeons, which means that the maximum number of dungeons that you will have completed, my guess that it will count for credit of, is 3. So that means that your creatures are going to get that +5 plus another potentially 6, right? So that's going to be 5 + 6 for a maximum of 11. Now the Adventure Song token is going to make it so that when you make your first match during your turn, venture into a dungeon. Then for each dungeon you've completed, trigger the following effects. So this is, by the way, further reinforcement as to why I think there are only going to be those 3 dungeons. You'll see that down here it says Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Lost Mine of the Philanderer, and Tomb of Annihilation. If we take a look at our dungeons here, we've got Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Lost Mine of the Philanderer, and Tomb of Annihilation. So that is just further evidence as to why I think that's how that will be. So for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, each card in your hand is going to gain 3 mana. If you've completed Lost Mine of the Philanderer, your creatures get a permanent +2/+2 buff. And if you've completed Tomb of Annihilation, you're going to gain 3 life for each legendary card on the battlefield and in all graveyards. Now, I'm really curious with this Tomb of Annihilation to know if that gain 3 life for each legendary card on the battlefield and in all graveyards is going to stack. What I mean by that is, let's say that you have 2 of the same legendary creature in your graveyard. Will you gain 6 life for having 2 legendary cards in your graveyard, or will you only gain 3 life for having that 1 legendary card in your graveyard but multiple copies? I'm inclined to think that it'll be for each card and not each separate instance, which means that when you make your first match during your turn, you could wind up gaining absolutely astronomical amounts of life, and then if you use this with Fortifying Draft as an example, you could wind up doing some absolutely crazy things, which seems really fun to me. Now, it's going to do this based on each of the effects. So, I mean, it's just every turn you're going to buff your creatures a little bit more. Each card in your hand is going to get a little bit more mana. And then you're going to potentially gain an absolutely ridiculous amount of life. Now, that said, I happen to think that the second ability, Legendary Allies, is probably the best of the abilities. But I am nonetheless excited to try out all of the abilities and see where this Planeswalker falls. The other sort of like low-key major bonus of this Planeswalker is that she has +5 to green, which happens to be the singular highest green mana bonus, tied with a few others, for any green Planeswalker. And given that green gem conversion is a thing, that is a really big thing to look at for her viability. Do I think that she's going to be a top-tier walker? No, I do not. Do I think that she'll be fun? Yes, I do. Which really seems to be the general theme of the walkers for this set. They really seem to have a lot of flavor and be really fun. This one. Okay. If your Dungeon Master looks like this fellow, I can tell you right now that my Dungeon Master does not look like this fellow right here. My Dungeon Master is married. This dude, Questionable. So, geez, just watch. I say this, and this dude is actually someone at Octagon or something. Now, my guess is that someone at Octagon actually drew this, as someone from Octagon actually drew one of the Chandras. And so to actually be able to draw this is very impressive. I could not draw this dude. However, I think that this dude is rivaling Kasmina for the crown of one of the most unpleasant-looking Planeswalkers in the game. So, okay, there's Shallow California me. All right, zoop, we're going back to Nalthazar. Yep, okay, we're there, guys. We're there. Okay, Dungeon Master. So, Dungeon Master is a white-blue Planeswalker. It's got 112 health. It's got +5 to both blue and white, +2 to green, and -2 to black and red. You'll once again see that this is based on the allied colors for this walker. Or, I mean, I'm saying allied colors, but blue, blue likes black. So, oh well, anyways. So, for the first ability, An Adventure Begins, you're going to venture into a dungeon, you're going to draw a card, you're going to gain 3 mana, you're going to create a gold token, and if you have dungeon spoils, meaning you have completed a dungeon, then your dungeons and ellipses support is going to gain the wealth emblem. Now, before I get any further into Dungeon Master, I have to just go ahead and say that there is nothing on this that tells us how we get the Dungeons and Ellipses token. So I'm guessing that you actually wind up getting it for just using the ability, but I don't know. We'll have to see. So maybe you get it for completing one of the dungeons. Once again, I don't know. The Dungeons and Ellipses token is a support emblem with when you venture into a dungeon or roll a d20, increase this card's level by 2. By the way, there's so many different things that are going to roll a d20 or venture into a dungeon that this thing is going to gain so many levels and get crazy high. So at the end of your opponent's turn, draw a card. If this support has a wealth emblem, you gain X mana. If the support has the challenge emblem, you gain X life. If the support has the heroism emblem, your first creature gets +X+X, where all of those X's are going to be equal to this card's level. Now, there's a heck of a lot of X's here, and I'm going to tell you right now that looking at this dude, I don't think he has a lot of X's. Believe you me, I do not think so. He does look older, but questionable. Anyways, Shallow Michael is going to retreat back into the background, whereas Nalthazar Michael is going to come back forward again. Okay, cool beans. Nice. So, with that first ability, An Adventure Begins, if you have completed a dungeon, if you've got the dungeon spoils, then your support is going to gain the wealth emblem, right? Remember, that's going to be the first of your 3 emblems, and that wealth emblem is going to make it so that you gain X mana every single turn, where X is going to be equal to the level of this support, which is probably going to be astronomically high, which is really, really good. The second ability, A Challenge Appears, is going to roll a d20. If it's a 1 to 5, spell cards in your hand gain 6 mana. If it's a 6 to 10, your first creature gets a +5/+5 buff. If it's an 11 to 15, your supports gain 3 shields. If it's a 16 to 20, perform each of the effects above. So 25% of the time, you get all of them. And then the other 25% or 75% of the time, split into 3 sets of 25%, you'll get one of these other abilities. So then your Dungeons and Ellipses support gains the Challenge Emblem. The Challenge Emblem is going to be that you gain X life based on the level of the support, which is, once again, pretty solid. So first ability seems quite good. Second ability seems quite good. The third ability, the Hero's Triumph, is going to fetch up to the first of each of a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, and a wizard from your library, and put them all directly into play under your control. If you have a full party, which means that you have a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, and a wizard on the battlefield, and by those, you need to have 4 separate cards that will have a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard, not just a single card that has all 4 of those subtypes. Then you'll have a full party, and if you have a full party, then your Dungeons and Ellipses support is going to gain the Heroism Emblem. That Heroism Emblem is going to be if the support has the Heroism Emblem, your first creature gets +X+X, where X is equal to this card's level. So I really like how the 3 abilities look and work. I think that this Planeswalker will actually be a really fun Planeswalker, and then will either wind up being really, really great or just really mediocre. So it's really hard to tell by looking at it. It's something that you're definitely going to have to play with, and then you'll be able to see. That said, I do really think that the studio had a heck of a lot of fun making this set. This Planeswalker, I think, is kind of like just further proof at how much fun they had making the set, between putting in uncards and promo cards and then making a Dungeon Master, which is like just a completely unique Planeswalker, and making the whole thing Dungeons and Dragons themed. I don't know. I would love to know from them if they'd like to actually like play D&D together on top of Magic, because there's really a lot of creativity here, and I think that they're having a lot of fun with it. So I like seeing that. It tells me that the studio is having some fun making these cards, making these Planeswalkers, making these sets, and that's always good to know. So then we're getting a new event. That new event is called You've Found an Entrance. Now, this event actually looks really cool to me. I can't wait to see a little bit more of a rundown of what is going to be in the event. But as we read it, you'll see that it has a very unique feature to it. So it's a PVE event. It will have progression rewards. There's no entrance fee. It's going to be standard. All Planeswalkers colors are allowed. It's going to have 10 total encounters. And then there's an initial encounter related to a node that may unlock another node according to the objective completed. What this tells me is that this very well may wind up being like Avacyn's Madness, where you're going to have an event or a node where you've got two objectives, and either you complete one of the objectives or the other, but you can't complete both. So for example, take 10 or less damage, or take 11 or more damage, as an example, right? Where you're going to complete one or you're going to complete the other. And from the way that it seems is that based on which of the objectives you complete will determine which nodes you will unlock, which means that as you play through, it's kind of like you get to pick which of the sides you're going to be trying to aim for to play. So not only are you going to be trying to achieve objectives for the sake of achieving objectives and getting ribbons and unlocking progression rewards, but you're also going to be doing it as a sort of like you're venturing through your own dungeon, right? You found an entrance to a dungeon. And so it's like you're actually venturing through a dungeon and collecting rewards for venturing through that dungeon. Once again, I think this is really creative. I think that's really, really cool. It just shows that I think they're just having a lot of fun making this set, which is really cool. So some of the encounters are going to spawn event supports. There's going to be a recharge timer of 8 hours. The original initial charges is going to be 1 with max charges per node of 4, and there's going to be a duration of 46 hours. So I'm really excited to see how this particular event works out. I hope that it works out as I am reading it, because if it does and you unlock different potential nodes based on objectives, that would be just super, super cool. So fixes. I know that this is a really big section for a lot of you all. So fixes with this patch. So it's going to fix some text issues. It's going to fix an issue with the Homunculus card, where the card's crew was also triggered for the opponent's creature. It's going to fix the issue with Elven Bow that wasn't giving reach to all the elf creature or elf token creature cards. It fixed an objective with the quest objective not being counted if the quest was received when the player was in a match. It's going to fix an issue where fractal tokens were freezing the game on right conditions. Thank goodness. It was terrifying to run into fractals already because they're so incredibly strong, and even more terrifying because if you destroyed the things, it could potentially crash your game, which was terrifying. So I'm really glad to see that that's getting fixed. Fixed an issue with Kaya the Inexorable's third ability, where the token mechanics didn't work with supports. Fixed an issue with event deck creation, when a player created an event deck and exited editing without using autofill, the autofill prompt would stay on the screen. And finally, fixed an issue with Rootless U, Inevitable End, and Steps Followed, where after the Rootless U died or during the card fetch action, a rectangular effect would appear in the middle of the screen. So these kinds of fixes are always very welcome. And finally, we've got some changes. Colors of Magic reward change. Reward boosters have all changed for all tiers. So the 20 score is going to go from Ikoria to Kaldheim. The 100 score is going to go from Zendikar to Strixhaven. I would imagine that we're also going to see a change to Trial of the Plains, and that Trial of the Plains is going to, instead of providing the current set of Strixhaven, will then update to the new set of Forgotten Realms. But we'll want to see if they say that that is what happens. So that is my rundown of the patch notes. I hope this was informative. You learned something. It was entertaining. Thank you so much for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next one.